And welcome back to the Idiots Football Show for episode number 2. This episode, we're going to be going over our Week 1 predictions, our 3 locks of the week here, especially going up against the FanDuel odds. And then we're going to do start and sit for the week. And if we have enough time, we'll end up hitting, we'll do a little stuff about a fantasy football draft. So let's get right into it. All right, for our first segment, we're going to talk about our 3 locks of the week. So I'm going to take Denver versus Seattle for my first game at minus 6.5. I really think Denver's going to end up taking the cake here. You know, Russell Wilson has that nice, this nice rivalry game against Seattle. I really think it's going to be an interesting game. 6.5, it may seem a little large. That almost a full touchdown lead, but with how bad Seattle's been and how good Denver has become over this last offseason, I think that's going to be a very easy take.
All right, give me my Baltimore Ravens over the New York Jets at minus 6.5. I just don't see the Jets without Zach Wilson, without a few other key guys being able to knock down Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. They're so well coached. I talked about it last week with John Harbaugh. They're going to be prepared for this. The Jets are still an up and coming team, still a rebuilding team. I don't think they have the firepower to beat the Ravens. So I like that spread a lot for us.
And I think I'm going to go Pittsburgh plus 6.5. Playing against Cincinnati. Pittsburgh's not going to win this game, but every game that they have in that division, that AFC North, it's always a close game. Mike Tomlin keeps his games close. His defense is always top-notch. I think a touchdown is way too much for that kind of game.
All right, and for round 2, I got the Raiders versus the Chargers, and I think the Raiders are going to end up making sure that they're going to hold that line steady at plus 3.5 for the spread. They're a solid team. Obviously, the Chargers and the Raiders both got a lot better this offseason with, the Chargers getting countless defensive upgrades and the Raiders obviously picking up Devontae Adams, which is probably the biggest pickup of the offseason. But I have a hard time seeing how this defense, just through a quick preseason is going to be able to gel tight enough that they're going to be able to completely shut down that Raiders offense. I think that Raiders offense is just too potent to, not put up enough points on the board and at least cover this spread.
Yeah, a lot of people are doubting them this year, but I really like the Tennessee Titans and what they have going. We talked about Derrick Henry last week. I'm taking them at minus 5.5 over the New York Giants this week. Daniel Jones, bottom 3 quarterback in football. They are going to be better coached this year, I think, and they still have some weapons. Don't get me wrong. The Giants can make this a fight, but I do like that spread for the Tennessee Titans.
For my second pick, I think I'm going to go Tampa Bay minus 1.5 over Dallas. Dallas is not the same team as they were last year. They lost a lot of key pieces on defense and even on their offensive line as well. And even losing Amari Cooper, they didn't use him as much by the end of the year, but just that alone, you're losing a weapon. And Tampa Bay, Tom Brady's winning by more than a field goal. That seems pretty easy to me.
All right, and so we'll head into our final picks for the 3 locks of the week. So I'm taking this Philly versus Detroit game at minus 3.5. Honestly, as a big Philly fan, it's hard to not take this line, to not look at what Philly's done this offseason and go, all right, 3.5 versus of any team, the Detroit Lions, they should be able to cover that spread. And to be honest with you, although the Lions have gotten better and they are getting better consistently, I just don't see them beating the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, they've just become such a powerhouse in the NFC, so I really think that they have something special going on. And 3.5 just isn't a big enough line, especially coming out of the opening weekend.
I'm actually going to change my pick up. I had one in mind. I'm going to change it. I'm going to go with the Carolina Panthers at minus 2.5 over the Cleveland Browns. I really like what Carolina has going because I'm a big Baker Mayfield guy. I think the offense is going to get a lot better. Terrace Marshall, I think he's going to take a huge step forward in year 2. I like the pieces they have. I like the way the offense and the defense are put together, and I think they're decently well coached. Cleveland, they're starting Jacoby Brissett. I have zero confidence in what they're going to have out of him. Even though the defense is good, I don't know if they're going to stop Baker Mayfield. I think that's a really, really solid pick at minus 2.5.
And I'm going to stick with the trend that you two guys had, and I'm going to go with my team as well and pick Miami at minus 2.5. I think they're going to be their offense is going to come out hot. I think the new offensive-minded head coach is going to be he's going to be on full display. And yes, they're playing Bill Belichick, the best coach of all time, but they've lost significant help on the defense, losing J.C. Jackson, and they still don't really have any weapons on the offense. I can't really see them scoring points against this also really good Miami defense.
All right, so just to give a recap of who I took Denver versus Seattle at minus 6.5. I took the Raiders versus the Chargers at plus 3.5. and I took Philly versus Detroit at -3.5. Now, out of those three, my personal favorite for this week is going to have to be Philadelphia, just because, obviously they're my big team, they're my guys, and to see them lose to Detroit by, more than 3.5, or to even see them lose against Detroit, I have a hard time seeing that. And really, to be honest with you, this 3.5 line just feels way too small for this type of Philadelphia team coming into this season.
Yeah, I have the Ravens, the Panthers, the Titans coming away with wins this week. I really like the Ravens at -6.5. I don't think I really think that's a slam dunk. Joe Flacco isn't going to be the guy who's going to come out there and beat them. It is in New York, so I know Jets fans are going to turn out. They always do, and New York fans are some of the rowdiest in the entire league. But Baltimore's just got too many good things going on. Ronnie Stanley's back practicing this week. They're all-pro left tackle, hasn't played in a year and a half. So there's really good things happening for the Ravens. They're finally a bit more healthy after a really, really bad season in 21.
And my other picks are Pittsburgh +6.5, Miami -2.5, but the obvious easy one for me is Tampa Bay -1.5 over Dallas. I think it's impossible to go against Tom Brady. He's the literal GOAT. Their team is always stacked. Their offense is even better than last year, adding Julio Jones, and their run defense is usually best, second to none. I think they easily take this one over Dallas.
All right, so we're going to get into our second segment here, our starts and sits for the week. So we're going to go over some start and sit scenarios, for fantasy football. You might have these scenarios in your fantasy football team, and we're just going to ride out, figure who we like the most, and who you might want to go with for week 1. So for our first combo, we're going to have Miles Sanders versus Tony Pollard. Now these are two running backs, both in the NFC East. They're going to have big week 1s. We'll see what's going to happen. To be personally honest with you, though, and this is coming from an Eagles fan, I really do like the way Tony Pollard's outlook looks this week. And that's because not only do they not have guys like Michael Gallup fully healthy, and guys like Jalen Tolbert are still getting accustomed to the scheme, but you give Tony Pollard a real good opportunity to get a ton of receptions his first week against Tampa Bay. And honestly, for a guy who's very, very complimentary to Zeke, I think we're going to see a lot of two running back schemes this week. Really heavy on that, really heavy on getting Tony Pollard involved up and early if they want to see them win. And the reason why I'm really just not a fan of Miles Sanders this week is just purely for the fact that, he's coming off that hamstring injury. He already has been pretty iffy in the past for the Eagles, and they've drafted other guys like Kenneth Gainwell, who kind of shown that they're not necessarily super, super confident in Miles Sanders. Furthermore, I think you're going to see a big committee for Miles Sanders coming up this first week, especially coming off that hamstring injury. Now, will we see, Miles Sanders actually score a couple touchdowns this year, unlike last year? Maybe, and that could totally swing the pendulum towards Miles Sanders' way. But currently, for me, right now, I'm very high on Tony Pollard for week 1 over Miles Sanders.
Yes, this is a conundrum, I guess, on my team. This is one that I'm trying to work through and figure out who I want to take. I am leaning towards Miles Sanders at the moment. I've always liked the Penn State running backs, the guys who come out and they always seem to perform. Saquon obviously has struggled a bit, and Miles Sanders has hit some injuries and struggled the same way. I like the fact that he's not playing behind a guy like Zeke. He isn't. I mean, Kenneth Gainwell, sure, he could be a guy that factors in. I don't know if he's going to factor in week 1, but you make a great point about how he's coming back from an injury and that they may give Gainwell a little more of a run, considering the fact that he's coming off that injury. So I don't love that Tony Pollard is behind Zeke. I'm not a huge Zeke guy. I think he's kind of past his prime, and running backs just don't last that long in this league anymore these days. And Zeke could certainly be one of them, but he's under a huge contract, and he's a guy that they're going to give a lot of carries because of that. So for me, Tony Pollard is really more of a weapon out of the backfield in the passing game and not so much in the running game. He may factor in more towards the later part of the season, but I just like Miles Sanders right now because I do feel like he's going to get the majority of carries and probably the majority of targets in the passing game as well for the Eagles. And even having the injury, I'm decently confident he can get me 10 points. And that's kind of really what I'm looking for when it comes to these running backs. I don't have a lot of depth, as you'll probably hear more about my team throughout the podcast season. It's a pretty weak team when it comes to running backs. So a guy like Miles Sanders, I'm banking on this guy coming back, and I think being what people expected him to be his rookie year.
Whenever I see these running back matchups for just during 1 week, I like to look at the matchups. I like to see how you think the game is going to play out.
Yeah.
You've got Philadelphia going against Detroit. Philadelphia last year was a very run-heavy team. I think they were the top rushing team in the league last year.
Yeah, in the second half, they were the most run-heavy team after being one of the most pass-heavy teams for the first 8 weeks of the season. One of the most odd transitions I've ever seen.
It was crazy. And I remember even last year they played Detroit, and they ran the hell out of the ball over them. And then I look at this Dallas team playing Tampa Bay. To me, that looks like a shootout. That looks like more pass-heavy games.
Right.
Tampa Bay is always like really good at stopping the run game with their great interior linemen and their linebackers. I would also lean towards Miles Sanders. I think there's just going to be more opportunity for him during the game. I think they're going to be ahead of the game early on and be ahead late. So I think they're going to know what to do and just run the ball like they always do.
So you heard it here. That's 2 out of 3 guys that are going towards Miles Sanders on this pick. So if you have him in fantasy, it looks like Miles Sanders is your guy over Tony Pollard. All right, for our second matchup of the week, we have 2 running backs on the same team, actually. We're going to have Damian Harris go up against Ramondre Stevens. Now, this is an interesting battle here because obviously, we're not exactly sure how these roles are going to shake out for these 2 players, especially with James White retiring in the offseason. We might see Ramondre Stevens have a significantly bigger pass down role. Unlike we've seen in the past, we're finally going to get a new running back, a new face, really taking over a big share of this Patriots backfield and see if he can become a staple face just like James White was. Now, the only thing is that Damian Harris did have a great season last year. He really is a true 3-down rusher and can offer a ton of versatility for that team. Now, I know the Patriots they're an odd team to predict, an odd team to figure out, but to be honest with you, I just like having the surefire thing in Damian Harris just because I know no matter what, he's going to get the goal line work. He's going to get at least 10 to 15 rushes in this game. We'll definitely see him get close, if not get a touchdown. So I have a hard time passing up on that instant opportunity, that instant, here's 10 points, and it'll help my fantasy team, win this week. I'm taking Damian Harris every single time.
Yeah, it's a tough one because you look at the history of the Patriots, and they've always handled running backs a little differently than every other team. And I think that stemmed a lot from throwing the ball 45 times a game with Tom Brady. And now maybe with Mac Jones, it's a little bit different. But you talk about that year that Damian Harris had last year. I mean, he was 15 touchdowns and 925 yards. That's legit. I don't think they're going to run right to a guy like Stevenson. Even so, even with the way Belichick's handled things over the previous years, I don't think they're going to start giving the ball to Stevenson just because, right? I think they have every reason in the world to go to Damian Harris. He's had, so far a pretty solid career, 700 rushing yards in the year before that. I think this guy is, like you said, a 3-down back, a guy who basically gives you everything. Maybe Stevenson gets some of the goal line carries that Damian Harris doesn't get. It's possible. They always mix in a guy on, maybe on 3rd down. They want to use him as a kind of a bulldog up the middle or something like that. But Damian Harris, to me, is just a better running back at this point. And the Patriots just don't have a lot of reason to really go away from him. He's been so successful for them. Why go away from it?
They're going to be so hard to predict this year. They don't really even have an offensive coordinator to be calling the plays. I think it's going to be Belichick or maybe one of the other assistant coaches that are calling the plays this year.
I believe it's a tandem between Patricia and the other previous assistant who had come back to the Patriots. It's a weird system because the last time Belichick had talked about it, he was very ambiguous with his answer. He wasn't very sure whether or not he was going to say, hey, it's this guy or this guy. It seemed like it's going to be a combination of a couple of guys.
So it's really hard to predict. But I think both running backs are still going to be serviceable through the entire year. I think you can. I think this week, I think it's Damian Harris. I think they're going to run the ball a lot more with him. They're going to be more like they're going to rely on him more. They know what they're getting out of Damian Harris. But if you have Stevens in a PPR league, I'd say hold on to him. You know that he might be able to fill in that White role. What's his name?
Oh, James White.
James White. He might fill in that role a little more, being a pass catcher out of the backfield. So keeping him in a PPR league would be a very good idea. But it's going to be Damian Harris week 1. But after that, I'd say keep your eyes on Stevens. I think he can still be very serviceable as a running back, at least at your flex.
I think the good thing about Stevens is especially being in this type of offense with a Mac Jones style quarterback, it gives him a big opportunity to get a lot of receptions. So, obviously, as you can see, between us 3, we all went Damian Harris here. So, clearly, that's our guy. If you have Ramondre Stevens versus Damian Harris, even if it's in PPR, I think we're all saying, go Damian Harris.
I believe so.
And for our third matchup of the segment, we're going to have Ezekiel Elliott go up against Josh Jacobs. So, this is a little bit more of a high-tier player bout. And, a lot of teams, they might have these guys simultaneously starting. In some other leagues, you might have maybe one guy's on your bench and the other guy's starting, and, you just have that powerful of a team. So, to be honest with you, I really think Josh Jacobs is going to be the guy this week. I mean, I like Zeke. I think Zeke's going to be a lot healthier this year, a lot better this year, especially because, he's coming off those injuries. He's not going to be playing injured. But week 1, Josh Jacobs, I can't not see him scoring a touchdown. I can't not see him putting up a great season and being able to be a truly effective running back. I mean, he's a grinder. The guy's 6'3", 220. I mean, he's a huge running back. I have a hard time seeing the Chargers, who have had a hard time handling other running backs in the past, really containing Josh Jacobs and the rest of that Raiders offense. So I think it'll really open up the paths and the run lanes for Josh Jacobs. So obviously, you can tell my pick here is Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I just talked about Zeke a little bit. I'm not a huge believer in him anymore. Even though he's, I talked about Tony Pollard, and the reason I wouldn't start him is because you have Zeke in front of him. But it's the fact that they're going to share carries, and I think that sharing carries is not exactly indicative of a running back who is in his prime anymore. And you're right, he's a little healthier, and they're still going to play him a lot because of that contract he has. And he's a guy who's always going to get you those 3rd down and 1, 3rd down and 2 conversions where you can just give it to him up the middle, a little dive play, and he'll get those yards. Because he's one of those bulldogs, kind of like a Derrick Henry, not quite as good, but in that same tier. I really like Josh Jacobs, and he had a bit of a down year last year. He didn't do exactly what everyone expected him to. Coming off 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons and only puts up 872 when it comes to last year. But I think that Jacobs is a bounce back guy this year. Going to score a lot of touchdowns, and he's the featured target there. I think he really is. Obviously, Devontae Adams has added to that offense this year. You've got Darren Waller, but he's really the only running back, now without Kenyon Drake, now that he's a Raven, he's really the only running back that's a big name there, a guy that has a great track record, and a guy that I think is going to really make a splash this year and come back, and maybe could be one of the comeback players of the year, because he was a little bit of a down year last year.
I will agree with you on that, but they did draft a rookie running back. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean much.
Again, but he might not play until like week 10. I mean, it may not be a featured role for him for a while, even if he does get a few carries.
No, that's very fair. I mean, it really gives Josh Jacobs the opportunity to be that sole number 1 back, that sole workhorse back in the backfield.
And the probably the most frustrating thing as being a Josh Jacobs fantasy owner last year is that when you would watch the games, you'd see that he wasn't utilized the way we would want him to. He wasn't in almost a lot of the plays. He wouldn't get the touches that we really thought he could definitely handle because he is a workhorse. You've seen him produce very well in many games, but then also kind of get sidelined for some reason, and nobody knew why. But now with this new Mike McDaniel's offense, I think he can really shine in it. They do have a tough matchup against the Chargers this week, and that game could go either way. It's both pretty great offenses, and the Chargers do have a good defense. So I'm not really sure how the game itself is going to go, but it's going to be more favorable than what Zeke is going to have to face in Tampa Bay. As I said before, Pollard's not really going to do well against that Tampa Bay defensive line and linebackers. I don't think Zeke will have much of a chance either against them. I think they're so good that he's going to get limited this week. And I hate to say it too because I have Zeke in my fantasy league, so he might not be good this week. I think he'll still have a really serviceable year this year, though. He's always as much as they split time, he's still the lead back, and he's still a great running back to be able to get you at least 80 yards a game. I think he'll be solid. But for this week, Josh Jacobs is probably going to get you the most yards, probably the most productivity out of the two.
All right, so as you can see from us three, we're all going with Josh Jacobs over Zeke here. So we really think that's going to be the move for Week 1 of fantasy football. So now we're going to move on to our next positional group. We've just done a bunch of running backs. Now it's time we're going to talk about a little bit of a receiver, start-sit situation. And let's talk about Amari Cooper versus Christian Kirk. Now, this might sound a little odd due to the fact that, you obviously drafted Amari Cooper much higher than Christian Kirk. But I think there's something to be said by, looking at the quarterback situation of Jacoby Brissett and how viable that Cleveland team is going to be Week 1. I mean, it's just a very odd situation, new quarterback, new receiver, new team, new scheme. It's a lot of new things that need to go right Week 1, and I'm not very sure that they're going to be able to do that. Now, to say the same for Christian Kirk, I mean, obviously he's another receiver who, left in the offseason, found a new team, a new home, and with that, a new quarterback, a new head coach, a new scheme. But I have a feeling that Christian Kirk just has a little bit more stability there in Jacksonville between Trevor Lawrence and Peterson, because we know Peterson's going to throw the ball and really let that ball fly. Especially as an Eagles fan, being the former Eagles head coach, I really got to watch him and understand his play style and his coaching style. And I really think that Christian Kirk's going to have a great opportunity Week 1, to be that feature receiver and to really be a target hog. But I don't know. I have a hard time seeing how Amari Cooper is really going to be a crazy week 1 play. I feel like his upside is really just it's all based on the shoulders of Jacoby Brissett, and to do that, that's a risk I don't want to take.
Yeah, you look at both of the wide receiver rooms on both of these teams, Cleveland and Jacksonville, and it's not good in either spot. I mean, Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably the second best out of the three guys we're talking about, or second best receiver on any of the teams. I do like Donovan Peoples-Jones a lot. I think he's going to have a big year. But I think Amari Cooper and Christian Kirk are the featured guys in those offenses. They are. I mean, they're going to be the ones getting the most amount of targets. So it really comes down to T-Law versus Jacoby Brissett, and I don't really like either of them. I thought Trevor Lawrence was a huge failure last year. I don't think he did anything good, and maybe that was more on Urban Meyer than it was on him. But even when the interim coach came in for the last few weeks, I wasn't really too impressed there either. But Jacoby Brissett is a proven entity where Trevor Lawrence isn't as much, and I really haven't seen Jacoby Brissett impress me, really, for a long time. I mean, he had a lot of chances with the Colts. He wasn't ever that good. So for me, I like Amari Cooper a little bit better as a player. Christian Kirk, I like maybe the matchup a little bit more. Washington's defense is not what it once was. I think I almost got to go Kirk here. I think Kirk is maybe the slightly better play. You kind of talked me into it. Just because of Jacoby Brissett, I keep thinking about it. I keep thinking about Christian Kirk versus that Washington defense. I start to like it more and more.
And furthermore, the thing I really like about Kirk is, he is paired up with other guys like Marvin Jones Jr. on that offense and Travis Etienne. There are other opportunities to really free up that offense and free up space for him.
Yeah.
Because, Travis Etienne's going to be out there catching passes. Same thing with James Robinson. Versus, a team like Cleveland, you really only have are you really that excited about David Njoku catching passes or Donovan Peoples-Jones catching passes?
I do love Peoples-Jones. I think he's going to have a big year.
I get that, but I just have a hard time seeing how that Jacksonville offense isn't more spread, more open, and just gives Christian Kirk, their receiver 1, way more possibilities than Cleveland gives their receiver 1.
And Cleveland Brown, I mean, when you have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt in your backfield, you're going to be a run-heavy team. And when Amari Cooper is your only receiver, he might be double-teamed off the line, at least shadowed by another defensive player. I watched Jacoby Brissett play last year for the Dolphins a lot. No, there is nothing exciting about his game.
Agreed.
He's very one-dimensional. He likes his one receiver. I saw him throw to Devontae Parker a lot last year. And that's the only way that Amari Cooper might get his productivity up, is if he's that guy for Jacoby Brissett to get open, and he'll look down his lane all the time.
I think he almost has to be, though, right? I mean, who else is really going to be?
The only other guy would be, I feel like, Njoku because of his athleticism.
Maybe Njoku.
But that's about it. I like Njoku. He's a hometown guy from where I grew up, and my brother even played against him. But he's so up and down. He's so hard to tell this year. So
he's only just not had a lot of opportunities. I mean, he was sitting behind Austin Hooper for a long time, and they've been running that multi-tight end scheme. And, they even brought in another guy, Harrison Bryant. They've made that tight end a filled room and really have not given the greatest opportunities to David Njoku, especially for passing opportunities. And to be honest with you, I mean, we're really going to get to see how great of a player Njoku is this year, because he's going to be relied upon. He's going to be needed by this Cleveland Browns team in order to produce, especially offensively.
He asked for a trade once at one point, didn't he? I think that was last November or something.
And that was prior to what's called Austin Hooper leaving in this offseason.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and now they made him the 4th highest paid tight end in the league, which I thought was shocking.
For a guy who's done almost next to nothing, it's surprising that they paid him so much, but that must mean that he's really going to be utilized in this offensive scheme.
Yeah.
Especially when Deshaun Watson comes back. I mean, it's going to be nice to have a big body target, especially the one that you can hit in the red zone.
Yeah, but for this matchup, I think I'm also going to lean Kirk, just for this week. I think he's just the more safer play. The Browns are going to be a little unpredictable in the pass game, and they're going to run the ball. So I think Jacksonville might get a sneaky win over Washington.
Really? Okay.
I think they might come out with Doug Peterson as their head coach. He's a winning head coach. I think they can pull this one off against a little clumsy Carson Wentz.
Yeah, he's winning until he decides he doesn't want to win anymore. But as you can see, all three of us idiots, we all went with Christian Kirk for the clean sweep over Amari Cooper. And to be honest with you, I'm pretty high on that. I actually enjoy that pick. I think it's something interesting. So, yeah, if you have Christian Kirk and Amari Cooper in your fantasy teams, really look to start Christian Kirk this week. Now we're going to move to our flex position. We have a start and sit versus Antonio Gibson versus Rashad Bateman. Now, I know this is a little interesting matchup, especially because Brian Robinson has recently, he recently got shot in a attempted carjacking. Hopefully he gets back and has a speedy recovery. We'd like to see him on the field playing. But This gives Antonio Gibson a lot of opportunity that he otherwise would not have had. He's been moved to the special teams, and they brought back McKissick this year specifically to take down a lot of that passing role and the third down work. So we're probably going to see Antonio Gibson get a lot of first and second down work, which honestly will give him a great opportunity to get a lot of targets, a lot of rushes, just get a lot of yards and a lot of just stats, just acquire the stats needed for fantasy football, really start building it. And honestly, I have a hard time seeing how he's not going to be significantly better than Rashad Bateman this week. Rashad Bateman's in a very interesting situation, and I'm sorry, who are the Ravens playing this week, if you don't mind me asking?
They're playing the Jets.
They're playing the Jets. So you know what? The Jets are a crummy team, and to be honest with you, I could see the Ravens running all over the Jets. The Ravens are a run-first team. Yeah, they want to pass the ball, but that's what you have Mark Andrews for. As much as I liked Rashad Bateman, especially as a prospect last year and watching him grow and develop, I really don't think this week one we're going to see him do much better than Antonio Gibson can. I think Antonio Gibson's floor is almost as high as Rashad Bateman's ceiling this week.
I feel like on that Baltimore offense, there's going to be a lot more to open up in that passing game. With Hollywood Brown now gone to Arizona, I think Bateman, this is his year to fill in that role and become that number one guy. You didn't see too much of him. He was hurt last year, but I think he's going to have like a really highlight season. He could have up to 1,000 yards and up to 7+ touchdowns. I think this season he can really grow as a great wide receiver in this league. But for this week, I think you're right on that. I think they're going to pretty much roll over the Jets, and by the second half, they might be running the ball a lot more with their running backs than they are passing the ball. I'm scared of Antonio Gibson, the way that this offseason has been going for him and that he's been moving around in the special teams. It looks like his role's going to get diminished. So that's the only reason why I'm a little scared about this flex position this week.
I think the interesting thing is that, if Antonio Gibson, especially this week, can hold the ball and hold the rock steady, because he has had a fumbling issue, that's why you see him moving around special teams and trying to use him and utilize him in different spots. I mean, this is a guy that could potentially be a receiver like he was in college. I mean, coming out of Memphis, he was a receiver who had way less running back work, but it ended up coming into the league as a running back. I think he has a lot of opportunity, a lot of ability to do a lot of things, and honestly can even win back his job for this first couple weeks without Brian Robinson being in the offense. Antonio Gibson, I think he has to know as a player that this is a make or break couple weeks for him in order to figure out, are you going to be the number one running back, or are you going to be the number 3 running back who's catching kicks and punts?
Yeah, Adam said it well. Rashad Bateman is a guy who's the new number 1. He's taking over that spot from Hollywood Brown, but what he's also going to face doing that is he's going to face a lot more number 1 corners. And he hasn't really experienced that this year, or really any year. So that's going to be something he's going to have to deal with and have to learn and grow into. So I don't know if Rashad Bateman is a great play, especially against a guy like Sauce Gardner. Gardner's obviously never played a game. He's never been in the NFL before, but he's incredibly talented. That's why he was taken as high as he was. So I don't have a lot of confidence in Rashad Bateman this week, and I don't really like the Gibson play either. I'm not sure I like either of these guys. J.D. McKissick, like we talked about, is a big ad for them, and Brian Robinson, as you mentioned, when he comes back, that won't factor into this week, obviously. But Gibson down the line is probably the worst play, but I do think he's probably slightly the better play this week, just because Brian Robinson isn't going to be there. J.D. McKissick probably won't get too many carries. I wouldn't think he'd be a huge factor. And Rashad Bateman's just going to have a little bit of a learning process with facing a guy like Sauce Gardner and a player as good as Sauce Gardner. It's going to be tough for Rashad Bateman. And also the fact that the Ravens have guys like Mark Andrews and their rookie tight end Isaiah Likely, who's going to get the ball a ton. He's an excellent player. Coming out of Coastal Carolina in the 4th round. So I'm not sure Bateman's going to be a huge factor, and just based on the fact that Antonio Gibson will probably get the majority of carries, I would go with him.
I was going to say, because this does directly relate to Rashad Bateman, if I'm giving you a bet, Sauce Gardner let up a touchdown against the Ravens this week, plus 200, are you taking it?
No.
Interesting.
I don't think he will.
I mean, I know this guy hasn't let up a touchdown probably since high school. I mean, he's been an unbelievable talent.
Because I don't think the Ravens really need to throw the ball. They just don't have to. They're going to run the ball right down the Jets' throat. I mean, you have Kenyon Drake, you have Mike Davis, you have maybe J.K. Dobbins. It's looking like he's probably going to play. I don't really see why they need to really throw the ball that much. And if they do, it's going to be Mark Andrews.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. I'll be honest with you. I mean, just because I like that bet, I'm going to hammer down on that bet.
Okay.
You know, plus 200 against Sauce Gardner. He's a rookie corner. I would take him. I would take somebody scoring a touchdown against him.
He did have a really good preseason. That's what I've heard.
He did. He didn't let up a touchdown.
Yeah, and he extremely well in lockdown.
I should say, I don't think
he's
he had a
electric.
target against him.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's something to look up. But yeah, I think he had an outstanding preseason. And it is preseason. Doesn't mean much. I think I like Sauce Gardner a lot. So I think I'm going to lean towards Gibson this week as well.
Me too.
Fair enough. I think all three of us idiots are going for Gibson this week. So if you have Gibson versus Rashad Bateman this week in fantasy, I think it's really going to be a good idea to look towards Antonio Gibson. And finally, for our last start versus sit player candidate, especially because we're on ESPN Fantasy, you see a lot of older players kind of stick around in those rosters for a long time. So I want to get your guys' thoughts and feelings on Rob Gronkowski versus Antonio Brown, because God knows, they're still somewhere on those ESPN depth charts.
Which one's coming back first? That's the big question.
You know what? That's a good question. Who's going to come back first? You know what? My money's going to be on Antonio Brown. Man's just so talented, and he's had talks with teams like the Dallas Cowboys, which I would love to see him dismantle an organization like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's difficult to get a guy like Gronk back in the building where his body's so shot and the only person he wants to play with is Tom Brady. I think you can convince a crazy guy like Antonio Brown to play for your team, maybe play 6 games and then freak out and leave in the middle.
Look, if I was a betting man, I would have a bet on Rob Gronkowski being a buck by week 10. He's going to come back. He always does. He always does. I have to believe that Brady, during that time he was away from the team, he said he was in the Bahamas. You got to think Gronk was down there with him. Of course he was. Gronk and him are, so tight. Brady came back out of retirement. Gronk's probably going to do the same thing. He's gone through a number of injuries in recent years. I think he said in the Super Bowl that he was bleeding from like 10 different places in his body after that Super Bowl. And forced him to retire for one time. It's been a rough last few years for him because he plays so hard and he's such an effective guy in every part of the game. Antonio Brown, I don't think another team is going to take the risk on him. He's just he's a diva in the locker room, and he's a terrible person. Like Antonio Brown is a straight up terrible person, and I don't think another team's going to say, hey, we're going to give you that opportunity. He hasn't been that great in previous years anyway. He's been kind of average. Antonio Brown with the Steelers, generational. But Antonio Brown with the Bucs and the Pats, he's been average. So I think that if anybody comes back, it'd be Gronk, and Gronk would fit right back into that Bucs offense.
Fair enough.
I'm going to take this back 3 or 4 years ago, and I remember the Seattle Seahawks. They already had a playoff spot locked, and I think they were still at the top of the division at the time. But their running back room was dismantled. They lost Penny. They lost their other Chris Carson,
yeah.
And they had nobody else. So then they call up Marshawn Lynch, and he came week 17 of the
Exactly.
league. I think the same exact thing will happen to Gronk. I think one, maybe two. I think all you need is one tight end injury in that Tampa Bay locker room for Gronk to say, I'll fucking come back and do a couple more Gronk spikes in the end zone, play with the best quarterback of all time.
I mean, especially if he's playing with Brady, you can't beat that.
You can't. I don't think you want to give that. He's going to miss the game too much. He's going to miss it way too much. I think he's going to come back. Antonio Brown is just an absolute nutcase. I don't think anybody wants to deal with that.
No, that's fair. That's fair. So obviously, you see, the idiots are 2 out of 3 on Rob Gronkowski here, coming back to the NFL. All right. I just wanted to bring up one more team regarding our start and sits. So, it's a little different of a start and sit just because we're talking about a slightly different situation here. We're talking about an actual team, with some free agents that could definitely be picked up and utilized by this team. So I want to look towards the the Baltimore Ravens and their dire need of receivers, and we could look to the free agency pool and still see players like Will Fuller and Odell and Cole Beasley and T.Y. Hilton are still sitting on that free agency market, and really a team like the Ravens could use them. I don't know if you guys have any opinion on who the Ravens should pick up here, but to me, I really think that a guy like Will Fuller, a deep threat, a guy who could really open up that offense for them, is someone that the Ravens sorely miss right now and could use that type of player just to truly open up that offense, throw a couple deep bombs, really make it an exciting season for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, the Ravens definitely need another receiver. I mean, Devin Duvernay and James Prochet are kind of the 2 and 3 right now. But you forget about Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely being huge parts of the receiving game. That's going to be a big focus this year. So Bateman, Likely, Andrews, that's a formidable top three. But then again, Mark Andrews is going to get covered well. Bateman's going to go against a lot of number ones. So yeah, they probably do have to sign another guy. Will Fuller, they don't really have a deep threat right now, like a pure deep threat. Devin Duvernay, he's fine. He's probably the speediest guy of the group, but he's not an incredible route runner. His hands are just okay. James Prochet's got incredible hands, and also a pretty good route runner, but one of the slowest receivers you'll find in all of football. I think he ran like a 4.6 40. It was very slow. But he was a 7th-round pick at SMU, so that's kind of what you expect from a guy like that. But, yeah, Will Fuller opens up a lot more for them. He probably wouldn't be too expensive. They don't have a lot of money right now, so that'd be a tough thing for that, too. And Steve Bisciotti, the Ravens owner, never signs divas. They don't like guys who are, number one, in trouble with the law or guys who are bad locker room influences. Any of those guys, they kind of stay away from historically. So Odell Beckham is not a guy I can see them bringing in any way, shape, or form. So Odell, probably not the guy. Will Fuller, maybe they sign him like week 3 or 4 because I think they probably would have done it if he was going to be a Raven before the season. They probably would have done it already. But maybe by week 3 or 4 they realize, hey, Prochet and Duvernay aren't really getting it done. Let's go to a guy like Will Fuller, who's really a proven entity, even though he's injured all the time. He's still a nice, formidable addition.
Well, yeah, whether he's injured or taking steroids, I mean, one of the two.
Injured or taking steroids, yeah.
It's hard to get him on the field, but if he can be on the field, it really might be a great weapon for this team.
I think it's pretty bad. I have never heard of Prochet before, and I think that's pretty bad when that's your number 3 wide receiver. I think they're going to ride it out for the first month of this season and see how their wide receiver core is really, how good it is, and if they can rely on all of these guys. To me, I don't think they can. I think they're going to go up some good defenses. They're going to play Miami, New England, Buffalo in these first 4 games. And I think they're going to realize that they need another threat.
Yeah.
And now you saying that they don't bring in like very well-known divas into the locker room, it maybe shies me away from Odell, but it does say here that Odell Beckham, after his ACL injury, he's going to be fully recovered by October or November. I think by the time he does recover from it, I can still see them picking him up. I think he's become a better locker room guy. They said a lot of good things about him in the Rams locker room. And I think not so much as an over-the-top deep threat, but just as an overall threat in the short game, the medium game, yards after catch kind of guy. I think he would fit in perfectly with that offense.
All right. Yeah, so, I mean, obviously the Ravens have a lot of opportunity. A lot of different things can happen as the season goes forward. So we'll just have to wait and see. All right, for my final segment here, I'm going to be talking about fantasy football, and specifically my fantasy football team. Within the weeks coming, after every week, we're going to be talking about my fantasy football team, how well we did, the mistakes I made, the things I could have done better, and the fact that every week I'm going to shout out my opponent like Ryan this week and how I'm going to kick his ass. It's going to be an easy win this week because I'm all in it for the big pot money prize. So at the end of the season, I'll be letting you guys know how I'm going to be doing progressively, the moves I'm going to be looking towards making and the ideas I kind of have about my team. And, we'll see how good I really am at fantasy football by the end of the season. I want to thank all you fellow idiots for tuning in this week to the Idiots Football Show, episode number 2. I'd like to thank idiot number 1 on my left, Goodman.
Thanks for having me. Go Ravens. Going to get a win against the Jets this week, I hope.
And I'd like to thank idiot number 2 on my right, Adam.
Great to be here again. Hope we can be next week, and I'm excited for all our picks to see how they pan out.
And I'm the host, idiot, Zach. So I'd like to thank you again, and have a great day.